The Madman! Alright, I'm back from DreamHack Austin and happy to announce that I got a tremendous placing of 3rd place for it. Sure, Shoop the winner may have gotten a trophy, and boy did that trophy suck, but for getting 3 stars, I got 3 kisses. Unique things about the DreamHack Austin Hearthstone tournament format is that it was last hero standing with a ban and 4 decks, and not conquest, so you had to submit slightly differently, and you were more encouraged to bring hard counters, such as Eater of Secrets against Secrets, such as Hungry Crab against Paladin, such as Galactic Crawler against Pirates. So I brought these 4 decks. In order to narrow the field of the 14 to 16 decks that I was considering, first of all, I narrowed it down to 7, and the way I did that was just by looking at highest win rates of decks. Mid-range Hunter, Pirate Warrior, Taunt Warrior, Mid-range Paladin, Burn Mage, also known as Discover Mage, Token Druid, and Elemental Shaman ended up being the ones I was considering. Elemental Shaman being a last-minute throw-in because I decided pretty early on that I was going to ban Paladin, and I was going to leave Rogue up, which was a bit of a different strategy, but I looked up Rogue statistics and broadly they weren't very good. All of my decks are capable of beating Rogue and capable of either rushing them down or outlasting them and then outvaluing 5/5s. As I entered the plan of basically leaving Rogue up and banning Paladin, that's kind of what steered me away from Elemental Shaman, since Elemental Shaman is good against Paladin but bad against Rogue. And then for the rest, I just kind of assigned percentages of what I expected at the tournament. Notable predictions that were wrong is there were fewer mid-range Hunters than I expected. There were a lot more Rogues than I expected, which is good for me since I left Rogue open. Fewer Miracle Rogues than I expected. Fewer Token Druids than I expected. And slightly more Jade Druids than I expected. There were 2 completely new decks that I didn't expect that showed up. The first of which was Control Paladin, pretty recent development, as well as Jade Shaman with Spirit Echoes. The meta of the tournament was slow enough that those worked out. The overarching philosophy behind my decks were just bring 4 good decks. I wasn't really aiming for a counter lineup like some did. Some people heavily teched in Crabs and Harrison and whatnot, but I just brought like 4 decks that were generally good against the field, and I relied on statistics as well as predicting the tournament meta. But even if I horribly mispredicted the tournament meta, I did bring the 4 decks that were considered to be like fairly good. The Hunter is a surprise on that, but looking at the congregation of statistics, Hunter was placing at the highest win rate out of all the decks, especially if I was going up against Rogue and not Paladin. You may ask which of the decks did the best, which of the decks did the worst. I actually performed about even on all of them, I believe. I didn't keep exact stats on which one of my decks carried and which one of my decks sank. They all kind of got banned at one point. Yes, I did have someone ban my Hunter. Hunter was the least banned one, and Hunter was also the least represented, other than Warlock, in the top 16 and top 8. I'm kind of proud of fine-tuning it a bit. I had seen decks with Timberwolf and I didn't like it. I had seen decks with 2 Tundra Rhino and didn't like that choice. Ultimately, I decided to take the best ideas that I saw. Fiery Bat was a bit too weak for me as well. And I just decided to cut the Timberwolf and keep the Galactic Crawler. I expected more Pirate Warrior, didn't actually run into very many. But I was happy to find a version of Mid-Range Hunter which didn't have to run Infested Wolf. Since that's kind of borderline a weak card, instead I put in the Eaglehorn Bow, which is very standard now, but took me a bit of convincing to put it in. 1 Tulvir Warden seems really good with 4 1-drops. Tundra Rhino, 1 of seems good. 1 Nesting Rock seems good. Like, I kind of just split the difference. The reason for a 1 of on every single one of these is because they're all situational. You most of the time don't want Taunt, but some of the time it's really useful. You want exactly 1 Warden because If you had 2 Wardens, the second Warden would often be dead, and you want exactly 1 Tundra Rhino because 2 Tundra Rhino is kind of bad. I brought this deck as basically the 50-50 deck. It was expected to go about 50-50 against everyone, and as such I didn't necessarily lead off with it in the last hero standing format. If it were Conquest, I wouldn't mind which one I led off with, but in last hero standing you want to keep your counter decks behind. This one was a fine deck to lead with if I didn't expect them to run Pirate Warrior though. Not much to say about this one. This deck is very straightforward, and it's a very budget deck. It costs about 2,000 dust to put together. Going into the tournament, I expected this mid-range Murloc deck to be the strongest one that I brought. I feel like if I were to choose a favorite deck, this one is my favorite. This is the one that I expected to be able to go 3-0. This is not necessarily the best build of the deck, but it was the one I was having the most success with. I did expect some people to go even lighter, even like more early game drops, more Murlocs, but what I didn't expect was a deck to come up and Shoop the winner had such a deck, a control paladin with Doomsayers and no Murlocs. I did actually get punished a bit with this deck because Hungry Crabs were out and about, and I had lost a few to Hungry Crab with this deck, but usually that's when they queued in a counter against this deck after I won. For Mage, this looks very standard. This is actually a very standard version of Discover Mage, but I did make the conscious decision to include the Volcanic Potion and the Thalness to have a bit of anti-aggro. It's just a good deck as well, and doesn't have any bad matchups other than Jade Druid. And kind of the same vein, Taunt Warrior doesn't really have very many bad matchups other than Paladin and Jade Druid. I brought what will probably look in the future as an unrefined Taunt Warrior list with Armor Smiths to stay alive against Burn Mage and Freeze Mage. Freeze Mage, a deck that I severely overpredicted would show up in the meta. 2 Bloodhoof Brave is extremely standard now. I do think Armor Smith may be a bit weak in the deck, or if you're running Armor Smith, Battle Rage seems really good. Just drawing more cards seems good. Shield Block probably should go out in lieu of Tar Creeper, another good taunt card which basically achieves the same goal that Shield Block's doing. And the Shield Slam can also be cut because when you become Ragnaros with the Fire Plume's Heart, you don't have any armor, and this card is not that good. So this is kind of unrefined of a list, but it was good enough for the tournament. And this deck ended up doing pretty well. My list kind of discombobulated people because I didn't bring Rogue, which a lot of people were banning, and I didn't bring Druid, which a lot of people were banning because they wanted to ban Jade Druid. Rogue and Druid were the 2 decks that heavy control decks really wanted to get rid of. And so usually the ban fell to like what I felt was my best overall deck, the Paladin deck. In the top 16, the deck lists were public. However, before the top 16, about 220-ish players showed up to play at DreamHack Austin. The deck lists weren't public, so often the players would bring both Paladin and Druid. I did not expect Jade Druid to be a very big force in the tournament, so for the most part I just banned Paladin, but nearing the end of it, I had to sometimes guess on whether or not they would bring Jade Druid or a mid-range Paladin. Because of the last hero standing format, if Jade Druid was left up on their side, Jade Druid could easily kill my warrior and my mage, and then all Jade Druid would have to do was basically get rid of one of my other decks. So they might ban Paladin, and then I'd have to try to win with Hunter. If they ever killed my Hunter, then Mage and Warrior would just lose to Druid. So yes, I did get high rolled out of the 3rd, 4th place semifinals, but I had to like really walk a fine line, and I took a lot of risks in the Swiss of not banning quite a few people as Druids. I actually got 0-3 quite a few times when I was streamed, which is interesting why I actually made it past the semifinals, or past even the Swiss round. I played against Chalky round 4, and he 3-0'd me with a very aggressive Paladin deck. I ended up banning his Druid because I actually expected he might bring Jade Druid, but he actually was aggro Druid, so that was one time where I got it wrong. And against Shoop, with the Paladin deck, I possibly could have won if I had gone face every single time against his Discover Mage I was later given the feedback on. And though that's a hard sell to make, perhaps I could have done something like turn 6 Spike Ridge Steed and then go to face, and then, or turn 7, and then turn 8 just Tyrion, turn 9 just keep going face from there. So I'm going to strive to look out for more of the face opportunities in the future. I thought Shoop's deck was very innovative, and in fact he managed a 3-0 dog with his Control Paladin deck. It's a deck that looks promising, very weak to Rogue and Druid, but in the tournament you could ban a deck. Not sure how it'll appear on ladder, but if Rogue starts to falter, I could see Control Paladin being a very good deck. And Spirit Echo Shaman is also looking to be a good deck for the same reasons. It's good against most except Quest Rogue. So Quest Rogue is going to have a spot and keeps those two decks in check. One of the big storylines of DreamHack was that Tempo Storm placed 4 players in the top 16, and that's really cool. We sent a total of 5 players, 6 if you count Frodan, and you know, to be honest, Frodan should be counted, so we sent 6 players. The LPS and Frodan were the 2 Tempo Storm members who didn't make it to the top 16. Not that they should be laughed at all, because it was an extremely tough field. But yeah, Eloise, Just Saying, Reynad, and myself, and Reynad and myself making 3rd, 4th place. That was really cool. Go Tempo Storm. We did collaborate a bit on it, but we're all also fiercely individualistic, so we ended up submitting different deck lists, and even in the same deck we have submitted like different techs. But we did talk about things and we collaborated, and not so much practice, but maybe in the future. Talk about the girl kisses? There's not much to say there. We went to parties and girls can't really keep their hands off me. I'm someone with a pretty good reputation, so girls generally feel pretty safe around me. You know, unlike some people who will not be named. Unlike those other people though, I have a problem closing the deal, if you would. While I'm approachable and while I like talking with them, still at the end of the day I'm still single. I'm planning on stepping up my game though. About the friend zone, by the way, I believe that the friend zone doesn't exist, and the friend zone is the guy delusion in like putting themselves down nicely, when in actuality a friend zone is just basically getting rejected. Their definition of friend zone is what a girl is actually very politely rejecting you on. Girls are nice, you see. I believe you can be friends with girls, and that's great. And you can easily transition being friends into being like romantically involved if you want to do that. So, you know, do try to be friends with girls. Don't do it with hidden interests. You shouldn't try to deceive them by being friends only to try to date them or whatever. That's my take on it.